Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms. This is a prototype, all rules, components, all that stuff completely subject to change, and I'll have a link to the Kickstarter down below. In Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms, this is a semi-cooperative experience in which you are all trying to make your way to the heart of the palace. You're making your way here to the heart of the palace to sack the kingdoms, to take over, as you work together to try to free the kingdoms or all that stuff, and you'll be playing as one of a few different, various factions or whatnot in the game, trying to figure out how to work together and yet try to stay one step ahead of each other as you make your way inwards. Every single round, across a few rounds, you're going to be going through a chain in which you're going to be slowly making your way, placing people into the various spots around the board as you slowly make your way to the different levels of the city, each with their own consequences and price points and level of defense that they have attached to them, as you navigate the card play of the game, trying to contribute the right cards, use your abilities at the right time, and save the cards for the right points at the same time. You're going to have a few different pools of cards you can pull from, pools of cards you'll start the game with, and then as you get rewards in the game, you'll be drawing further from those pools of cards to take advantage of their specific abilities, whether you're getting extra points, whether you're getting extra balance in the auctions. There's going to be a set of auctions you're going to take in place in between each of the rounds, or whether you're going ahead and using the actual abilities, whether for ongoing or single player abilities, to modify dice rolls, to go ahead and add extra dice, to take over, to ignore opponent cards as you try to make your way inwards. The general sequence of play is you're going to be taking one of your units and placing it down on a spot on the outer edges as you work your way inwards. So at first you always have to be mindful of the outer edges of the city as you slowly move your in, but then other players can go ahead and start navigating the way further into the palace to tackle different spots, going further and further until eventually you'll be able to sack different regions and then make your way in from sacking the regions into the inner regions and eventually into the heart of the city where you can take people out. Along the way, you're going to be faced off against different cards. You're going to reach into, depending on the spot you go on, you're going to look at the type of terrain you're going in, and then facing off against that specific pile of cards, pulling a variable number of cards depending on which level of the palace you're going for, and figuring out what you have to be facing off against. Each one's going to have a threat level depending on where you're coming in from. You're going to be adding the highest threat enemy, plus some modifiers on the cards as the challenge to beat, and this is where the semi-cooperative part comes in. You're going to have to work together with your allies / opponents as you try to figure out how much they want to contribute to each battle in order to take advantage of different rewards. Because in each battle, when people are invited to join, when people are adding spells to the battle, you'll have opportunities to negotiate, to navigate, try to say, well, I'll give you this choice or that choice, or they'll get that option as you figure out how to split the rewards of combat, drawing cards from different decks, adding more cards to your benefits, potentially adding more units to your reserve as you go through this. You're going to be going through a sequence of play, pacing, and depending on the player count, you're going to be playing different number of rounds as you place different players on different pieces onto the board as you slowly make your way inwards, and then in between each round, you'll be having a set of auctions as well. Because the whole time you're navigating your cards, you're playing with your cards over here, trying to figure out which cards you're saving for various auction results, which cards you're utilizing for the combat benefits, which cards you're contributing to help your opponents, or which combats you don't mind seeing fail because of the semi-cooperative nature of this game, where you all have to make your way in. You all have to sack the heart of the city together, or at some point, or in some way, shape, or form, you have to make your way here in order to actually win the game, or as opposed to having the game winning. But you also have to be mindful of the fact that you do want to win ahead of your opponents, and you're trying to figure out when to contribute, what to hold back, how many units to volunteer, how many units to say you'll volunteer versus not actually doing so, all throughout the course of the game. In the auction rounds, you'll be fighting off for a variety of benefits, including fighting for the favor of Elric himself, who can go ahead and get an instant kill in battle, which makes him a very compelling unit to go for, as well as the other benefits of the auctions as you try to navigate across the 4 rounds of play, dealing with the various threats that will come up as consequences across the course of the game, as you take advantage of your unique competitive advantage, your unique faction abilities, your unique unit strengths, as you figure out how to manage the card play, how to get ahead of your opponents and become the ultimate winner in Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms. Which brings us to the review, starting off with what I like, which is the sense of teamwork this game provides. In Elric, you're going to be going ahead and working together, and you have to work together. If you don't work together with some players at the table, then you're going to find yourself falling apart very quickly. This is a game where you'll be inviting players to join at times, and inviting players to join against their will at other times, forcing them to in some way commit some degree of units to the battle. The downside is a willing ally will contribute more and help you more and will potentially get rewards, but an unwilling ally will still end up contributing a little bit, but may end up getting some of the rewards nevertheless, and so there's a constant balance of who to invite, how to invite, and to make sure that you're not always so far ahead that you actually have players helping you at the table. This has that sense of trying to get ahead of your opponents, but also not being too far ahead, because too far ahead makes you a threat in a game that relies very heavily on that sense of teamwork, and the sense of teamwork is present. As you play cards, as you tackle combats, as you roll dice and find yourself not getting what you need, but having an opponent play a card down to help you in your time of crisis in order to move the game forward, in order to make sure that you get your way to the heart of the city. This game very strongly does give you that sense of teamwork, and it does so with the card play along the way. You're constantly diving for cards or rewards, you're constantly trying to add more cards and figure out which cards will help you with the important auctions of the game, which cards are going to help you for endgame scoring, and which cards you're going to keep for the recurring equipment you use for doing combat, or the discarded one-time use cards you use for combat. These decks of cards chock full of tons and tons of cards, tons of abilities you'll be using in different ways as you reroll all attack dice doing a specific combat test, as you go ahead, as you add to the balance auctions, as you add endgame points, as you do plus modifiers to combat. Some of these being ongoing abilities, sometimes being one-time use, as you try to figure out which cards to save and which cards to hold onto. There's a lot of card play to be managing in the game, both your own card play as well as your opponent's card play as well. And the voting on the council, the auctions you have in between each round, those are incredibly impactful as you try to vie for which rewards you can take advantage of the most, and being mindful of the fact that all cards can be contributed to auctions in some way, shape, or form. So the question is, when are you holding on to them? When are you discarding a well-used equipment that can be very helpful in combat, but you want to get a hold of that extra auction because you can really benefit from having Elric as you move into the upper chambers, and as you know you're going to be facing off against harder and harder combats, and having that advantage on a given point can be incredibly impactful to the game and to ultimately who's winning. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, that sense of teamwork aspect is, at the end of the day, a semi-cooperative game. This game, Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms, is a semi-co-op experience. It's a game which you will have a sense of teamwork through most of the game as you make your way through the game, as you make your way to the heart of the city, but at the same time, there'll be plenty of opportunities and plenty of times where you have to be stabbed in the back. This is a semi-co-op system, and it comes with those aspects, with those downsides of semi-co-op play, as you find yourself working together a lot of the time, but also being at each other's throats parts of the time, and having players tank your gameplay in order to drive the game forward and to move ahead in the game, which has that aspect of, if you're too far behind, if you're not making your way there, being mindful of when to tank and when to enable has the same problems you would have in a semi-cooperative game, in the sense that it is both teamwork yet not teamwork at the same time. It has that necessity to work together as much as possible, but if you find yourself in a position in which you aren't going to win, strictly speaking, you are incentivized to not really help each other out. This is one of those games, as with many semi-cooperative games unfortunately, in which you kind of have to embrace the spirit of the game a little bit above the pure mechanics of the game, or it potentially has opportunities where it just won't work out quite as well. Additionally, and a little bit more pedantically, the graphic design is something that I'm not quite as much a fan of at the moment. I do believe this is something that's changing right now, but overall the card art of the game is fine, the general game itself is all that works, but the graphic design is okay at best as far as where I am right now. I do believe this is changing, so take that with a grain of salt. As I said already, this is a prototype. All things, art and components, all that stuff is subject to change. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, your unit economy can feel tight in the game. You're going to be constantly trying to use units to place on the board and trying to get various combat rewards to get more units in the game, but it often can feel like you don't have enough units and you're trying to play a bit of a balancing act of how much you can actually help your allies / opponents as you contribute units to their combat, versus the fact that your committed and engaged raiders are going to be put in boxes and set off to the side, and you're often dealing with not nearly enough units, or feels like you're not dealing with enough units unless you grab as many combat rewards as possible. The unit economy in the game can be a bit tight. Additionally, you're going to be checking stats at times on these boards, which units, which warriors or heroes are worth different metrics depending on which zone they go to, and that will vary by the different factions you have in the game, each having their own different little stat sheet as far as what they're doing, their own unit abilities or their own faction abilities you're going through, and at times you're going to be having to check those numbers and try to figure out what's actually going on. And the symbology, and this comes back to the graphic design, some of the symbology is not immediately obvious which one's which, especially on the cards as well, having these different symbols for the areas and trying to see your way through and trying to navigate the pathway, some of those things could be a little clearer when it comes to checking those stats. As far as final thoughts on Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms, this is one that I'm fairly torn on. For the most part, I enjoy the general gameplay of Elric Rise of the Young Kingdoms. I especially enjoy the sense of teamwork as you go through it, as well as the sense of card card play as you try to figure out how to make your way past across the enemies, navigating the various challenges they'll face off when they have specific abilities, or alternatively just navigating the general strength that they have, depending on which combats you have, depending on the situation at play. There is a fun puzzle to be had here that is also slightly hurt by the semi-cooperative nature of the game, at least for myself. I generally have not liked semi-cooperative games because of that aspect of, I feel to properly enjoy a semi-cooperative experience, you have to move a little bit past the pure mechanics of the game and into a thematic playthrough, which, depending on how much I like the game, is something that I struggle with at times. There are semi-cooperative games I enjoy, but I find that I have to push myself past that hump, and that's true in Elric as well. Overall, I enjoy the gameplay. I kind of just wish that they had given it a pure cooperative experience, although it would require a rebalancing of how the game actually worked, because, well, the game is designed as a semi-co-op competitive game in which you are trying to win across, as opposed to the other players, but you have to work together with them while you try to make your way there. For the most part, I enjoy this one. For the most part, I enjoy the pure mechanics of the game. I just really don't love the semi-co-op aspect in most games, and in Elric, it's I have the same complaint against that mechanic. As far as rating, I'll give this one a 3.5 out of 5. I like a lot going on here, but it has that semi-co-op nature, which is something I have not liked in other games, including in Elric. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, another semi-co-op game that I have found that I am also torn on but generally like is Mission Catastrophe from Carbon Alchemy. I find that one gives you the same problem. If you play it purely mechanically, it can be a bit frustrating, but if you're willing to let go a drop from that aspect, it can be a really enjoyable, solid experience. And then similarly, a game that is less semi-co-op but can at times feel like it, Moonrakers from IV Games is another game which you often feel like you're working together with your allies/opponents, and yet towards the end of it, ultimately there is only one winner in the game. At least that is, unless you're playing with the expansion, the digital expansion that makes it a cooperative game the whole entire time. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful. A link to the Kickstarter down below, and as always, I hope you have a good one.